Welcome to the Growth Boss Podcast, where we seek out the secrets to high-performing campaigns from some of the smartest marketers in the world. I'm your host, Gerrid Smith. Today I have Liam Darmody with me, and he's going to teach us how to build a magnetic personal brand that attracts clients, talent, and opportunity on LinkedIn. Liam is the founder of Liam's Brand Stand, where he helps coaches, founders, and executives and their teams build magnetic brands that attract clients, top-tier talent, and unexpected serendipity. What started as a pandemic side hustle has since evolved into a powerhouse personal brand with over 45,000 followers and content that's generated more than 23 million impressions. Liam's work spans from profile optimization and feature training to ghost editing. But at the heart of it all is a deep belief. LinkedIn isn't just a platform. It's the platform for creating opportunity and unlocking the next level of your career or business. If you're ready to rethink how you show up online, this is the episode for you. Liam, thanks so much for being here today.
That's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Liam, let's start at the beginning. Let's say I was interested in working with you. What sort of process would you take me through to help me build a magnetic personal brand on LinkedIn?
Totally. So I think the thing about personal branding that I think a lot of people don't necessarily get is just how intimate it can be. And so for me, a personal brand strategist has to be somebody that is very, very good at understanding people and getting to know exactly what they're trying to accomplish, asking thoughtful questions. So every client that I work with, we start out with a 60 to 90 minute interview where I get to know them intimately, right? What do they do? Why do they do it? How do they do it? Who do they help? What are their primary motivations? What are maybe some of their insecurities? What are some of the things that are holding them back, right? Because a lot of people are, particularly on LinkedIn, nervous sharing too much, right? There's this stigma around LinkedIn that even entrepreneurs struggle with sometimes. People worry that, what they're saying doesn't have enough value or people won't care about it. And that's simply not true. You have to sort of have a growth mindset. You have to have an abundance mindset when you're thinking about top of funnel marketing and personal branding. So for me, it's really getting to know somebody inside and out the best that I can in that first 90 minutes. And then from there, I'm able to essentially map out what an ideal strategy might look like. My core curriculum essentially touches on 4 different areas. The first is treating your LinkedIn profile like a landing page. Whether we like it or not, everyone is in marketing now, right? You have the potential to be online, sharing your thoughts, and you never know who might actually see them. So you have to make sure that you're crossing the T's and dotting the I's so that when they do land on that page, they're getting exactly what you want them to get from everything that's laid out there. They have an understanding of the services that you provide, what you do, what your backstory is, et cetera. And you've got calls to action to newsletters or booking an appointment with you to take a call, all that good stuff that I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize LinkedIn is capable of because it still has a little bit of a brand identity crisis in of itself. Everybody thinks of it as just the place we go to find jobs every now and then. But it's rumored that by 2027, 50% of the workforce in the US is going to be freelance. So how does LinkedIn cater to that demographic, right? And that's where I think you're starting to see them putting a lot of features into the profile, like the services section, for example, that lets you encourage clients to leave reviews for you so that people can actually quantify the value that you have had on others. And it's other people singing your praises. So that's the first section. The second section is really taking them through who is your ideal client profile and who are the people that you need to be orbiting around so that you're involved in the conversation that's relevant to your industry. There are 1 billion people on LinkedIn, right? And all of them are there to be introduced to you if you want them to. So you just have to really understand, how do you find it? Treating LinkedIn like a CRM with all the leads built into it already, and then understanding how you can get your feed to be a place that inspires you to get involved every day, because LinkedIn is always talking about joining the conversation. They want to see conversations happening on the platform. And if you have a curated feed that is very targeted towards your industry and your ideal client profile, then every opportunity you have to comment on their content is a potential lead magnet for your business, right? So that's the second stage. The third stage is core content strategy, right? What are we going to talk about? What should your content pillars be? I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of sharing more personal things. It's not uncommon to see somebody just using LinkedIn as a gigantic megaphone for the services that they provide. And it's pitch. It's sell. That gets noisy really, really quickly. And the truth of the matter is that if you build a large network on LinkedIn, not everybody's going to be a client. In fact, the majority of people will not be clients. So you want to make sure that you're putting content out that also engages that audience too. So my framework for content strategy is basically three-pronged content strategy. The first is you want 60% of your posts to be within your scope of genius. Okay. These are the posts that talk about who you are, what you do, why you do it, how you do it, who you help, right? They're your sales and marketing posts. They're probably a little bit less comfortable to create because you feel like you're promoting, and a lot of people don't love self-promotion. But truth of the matter is, if you don't do it, nobody will. So you have to be comfortable with that. The second bucket is fascination. And I typically say that fascination is anything that you're incredibly interested in and spend time learning about, even in your free time, right? It doesn't have to do with your job. So, I have dubbed my fascination innovation. I love AI. I love cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. I'm big into gadgets, like Meta smart glasses and things like that. So I share all of that stuff online as well. And that keeps the part of my network that isn't necessarily going to be a client engaged so that their network can start to see my content as well. So I'm always kind of orbiting around, right? And then that third bucket is what I call a window into your personal world. And these posts are a little bit more emotionally raw. They might be a little less comfortable to post because they're opening up about vulnerabilities and things like that. But they're also the ones that are typically the most endearing. And LinkedIn is an emotionally intelligent social network. Most people there have a deep amount of empathy for other people. And so when they see somebody posting something, like I will post about my weight loss journey, and going from 350 pounds to 300 pounds and how I want to get to 250 pounds next. A lot of people wouldn't feel comfortable posting that type of information out there, but the support that I receive from the community when I do that really lifts me up. And it also brings a very human component to your content. So I always say, if you give people a window into your personal world, some of them will inevitably come around the front door and knock, and that's where opportunity is, right? So those are the three content pieces. And I would say the fascination should be like 30% of your content, and then the personal stuff is maybe 10% of your content, right? And between those three, you have a pretty decent framework for creating and filling those buckets with content, especially if you're using AI to help you with that, which is something that I teach. And then the fourth pillar of what I coach is really understanding how to supercharge your networking efforts and make sure that you're building targeted audiences on the platform. That's where my Sales Navigator expertise comes in. And I basically will teach people how to use this very powerful tool called Sales Navigator that is the most expensive LinkedIn product that there is, but it's built for enterprise sales teams. So there's a lot more data that you can access within that tool, including a very helpful filter for if somebody has posted in the last 30 days, which gives you an indication of whether or not they're present. If you want to build an engaged audience on LinkedIn, you want to see people who are actually there. I think a lot of people make a mistake of saying, well, I'm just going to connect with anybody who has the title.
Sure.
But rumor has it that only 25% of LinkedIn's membership logs in on a monthly basis.
Sure.
So you have to be more strategic than that. And that's where Sales Navigator comes in. And then the other portion of that is how to leverage all of these magnificent AI tools that we have at our disposal now to supercharge our efficiency. So prior to doing what I do now, I spent 18 years in sales operations and go-to-market strategy at startups. So I'm very used to synthesizing different systems and processes and optimizing those processes. And I teach my clients basically how to set their go-to-market strategy up for success using a lot of these fantastic tools.
I love it. So let's dive into each one of these. I want to start with kind of the personal nuances that you're going to get in that initial 90-minute meeting. What are some of the things where you're like, that's gold? One of the gals I spoke with a couple episodes ago talked about how she has talked about her divorce journey on LinkedIn and how liberating that's been for her in the support that she's had, kind of similar to your journey. What are some other things that you really hope the founders, entrepreneurs share in that 90-minute call, and some things that are maybe hard to pull out of people?
So I think, really getting at the root of why they do what they do, the struggles that they have had doing those things, that is a very important part of your narrative. And I think that entrepreneurs especially need to think about the fact that they are in the minority. Most people on LinkedIn are W-2 employees, and most people sort of look at founders and there's a little bit of curiosity there. There's a little bit of envy there. How do they do it? There's admiration for the fact that they were willing to start their own business. And so it's important to try and extract all of those emotions that go into the building process, right? So the destination is the journey. The journey is the destination, right? And so you want to get the hardships out of them. What is it that inspired you to start this business? What is the hardest part of running your business? Have you ever thought about packing it in? Why did you think about packing it in? What's the human experience that you have had as an entrepreneur that will resonate with other people? And I think that we are, as a society now, so conditioned to sort of the bombast that happens on Instagram and other social platforms. And as a result of that, we're kind of craving that authenticity component. We want to hear the messy middle is the most interesting part. And so I've had clients that have broken down in tears during those conversations where I'm pulling stuff out of them that's like deeply rooted, and they don't necessarily feel it coming to the top until it does. And when it does, it kind of hits them. And I'm like, that's your story. That's it. Everybody has a story, and there's wins, there's losses, there's everything in between. And the more open you can be about all of it, I think the more magnetic your personal brand becomes, because it's more relatable, right? Nobody wants the polish and, everything's amazing, everything's hunky-dory, I'm the best at everything. No, growing a business is an incredibly challenging thing. And those of us who do it are fully aware that we could be riding high 1 minute, and 20 minutes later, we could be like, this is not going to work, I'm going to fail, right?
So absolutely.
So take people on that journey with you. And so that's what I do. I really try and dig in and sort of say, like, we're not just talking about your wins here. We're talking about your insecurities. We're talking about the things that are questionable for you. We're talking about what you think your weaknesses are, because you can lean into all of that. And if you frame a weakness and you say, this is something I'm not great at, people will rally around you and try and encourage you. And that's part of building an engaged personal brand.
Yeah, I love that. Now, the next phase is you talked about building out your LinkedIn profile as a landing page. So walk me through, this is, I assume, profile optimization. What are some of the hacks that you found to creating a great profile for your customers?
Yeah. So first off, you have to leverage all of the real estate that's at your disposal. And, LinkedIn has a big banner, and a lot of people just have a gray banner, or they have a banner with their name on it. And it's like, this is the first impression that you're making on somebody who lands on your page. Treat it the way that you would treat any website representing your business, right? So a nice banner is an important thing. Second is your headshot. Everybody has a 12 megapixel camera or some crazy amount of megapixels in our phone. Find somebody to take a picture of you standing somewhere smiling and make it look approachable. Have your face fill most of the space, because remember that everywhere that little icon goes on the platform, it's microscopic, right? It's the size of a pea. So you want to make it something that is approachable. They recognize your face. If you have a solid background behind you that's something color coded, people will notice that. Like if you change the color of your profile once a month, that will be something that people will comment on, right? Little things like that are nuanced, but really show how people are paying attention to you. Your headline is probably the most important real estate that you have on LinkedIn. And I say that because similarly to your headshot, it follows you everywhere. So you have 220 characters to work with. I would use keywords that are relevant to your industry in there. I also encourage people to make sure that the first 55 characters of that headline are really, really well defined. Exactly what you want people to see, because you want them to get that first 55 characters. The view of the first 55 characters follows you everywhere. So you want that to be a very concise message that is very easy for people to interpret what it is that you do, and then who you help, how you help them. And then I also encourage them to put a little fun fact about themselves in their headline to help break the ice. Mine is hot sauce aficionado, and I literally have 2 or 3 conversations a week that start off in my DMs with somebody saying, what's your favorite hot sauce? And sometimes they turn into clients and sometimes they don't. As you can see here, I have no shortage of hot sauces in the background, and about half of those were actually sent to me from people I've met on LinkedIn. So again, nobody would know that about me if I didn't put it there. And it helps people feel comfortable and makes you more approachable. So again, that's the personal side of it. For entrepreneurs, it's imperative that you're leveraging the sections that LinkedIn has created for that distinct group of people. So there's a services section on your LinkedIn profile that a lot of people don't know about. That services section is a place where you can invite clients to rate and review your services based on 4 different criteria. And if you can build those rate reviews up, we are now a very reviews driven culture, right? Amazon, Yelp, all these different places. You're looking for 5 stars. You want a 5-star experience. So leverage the services section to let your clients sing your praises and rate and review your services so that you have that social proof. LinkedIn only lets you invite 20 people per year to review your services there. So they make it sparse because I don't think they want people to collude or just gamify it. They want them to be authentic reviews. And so that is something that I take great pride in myself. I've got 43 5-star reviews and they're all from paying clients. And that sends a message to any prospective clients that I have done this before and they can see the caliber of people who are working with me and what they're saying. I've had people come to me and literally say that my services section and the ratings and reviews that I have there is the difference between me and the other person they were considering. And that's a big deal, right? That's exactly why they're there. So I say those are the biggest ones. And then the about section is important. Your featured section is a place where people will naturally go because it's highly visual. And so it makes sense to invest in having tiles there that are on brand and professionally done and have calls to action. So I have a book an appointment, I have a newsletter subscription tile, and then I have a visit my website tile. And all of those have been professionally created by a designer so that it's all on brand. And then that I can also use specific links that will make it easy for me to track if people are clicking that, because LinkedIn doesn't give you click data, but if you get savvy with it, you can kind of figure it out using some other third-party systems.
So is that like a Bitly type of service that you're using there?
So I use Calendly for my book an appointment button, which is the primary call to action I have on my profile, because for me, getting somebody on the phone and telling them what I do is where I shine. I also want to minimize friction. So if I send somebody to my website, I don't necessarily know if they went there. I don't necessarily get their email address. I would suggest if you are a power newsletter publisher, you potentially use that, because then you're capturing their email addresses and moving them to a third-party platform where you have a more direct relationship with them. But for me, I use the book an appointment button because that gives me the ability to get on the phone with them and get their email address. And then, using UTM codes or, specific Bitlys, things like that, you can track all that stuff.
Okay. Very good. You talked about building an ideal client profile. And I think that's got to be one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs to really hone in on. We all want to target the whole world. I literally had a call earlier today talking with an entrepreneur that had the same struggle. We all do it. We all struggle with it. What are some kind of keys that you found to really helping entrepreneurs, coaches, executives hone in on that ICP?
Yeah, it's very much like what you alluded to. We all want to think that our service can help everybody, and it probably can in some degree, but that doesn't mean that everybody's the right client for us. And I think that at the end of the day, if I'm working with somebody, I typically work with people who are, 2 to 5 years into their business. So they've already sort of proven market fit. They've already had some wins. They've already gotten some clients. And so I want them to have an understanding of, okay, well, who have you worked with that you enjoyed working with the most? Where have you added the most value? What was the most enjoyable thing for you? I've even gone through that myself. When I launched my business, I was very much thinking about, okay, I can do executive branding and I can do founder branding and I can do sales training and all these things that I certainly can do and applies to LinkedIn. I thought about doing a job seeker service as well. But at the end of the day, I love working with founders and entrepreneurs because they have a lot more freedom to just roll with the punches and put themselves out there. They're passionate about what they do. The other reason I love working with entrepreneurs is that oftentimes an entrepreneur is very well-intentioned, has a specific set of knowledge that they can share with people, but they don't necessarily feel comfortable selling, right? They don't love the sales process. And personal branding and social selling is your top of funnel marketing activity. And the way that I teach social selling is that it's more like socializing than it is selling. And so when you frame it that way, people think a little bit less, there's a little less cringe factor that goes into that. But that's ultimately what I have landed on, is that I love working with founders, especially because they're super passionate about their business and there's not as much friction, right? If you work with an executive in an organization, they're super busy. They're probably checking a box because they want to have a thought leadership brand, but they're also worried, like, what are my peers thinking about me? What's my boss thinking? What are my employees thinking? And that can just really muddy the waters, right? For me, you want to build a personal brand that is crystal clear, and understanding who feeds into that and who you will be able to speak to and the value that you can deliver is the most important thing. So I think that's a hurdle that a lot of entrepreneurs have to eventually get over, right? I can work with many people, but who are the ones that I'm best to serve? And so I go deep with my clients into understanding that. And, what are the past clients that you've worked with? What's the most successful client you've worked with? What's the most difficult client that you've worked with in the past? And why was that the case? And that's really trying to get to the root of it. I have people that talk to me all the time and say, well, I'll work with anybody. I'm like, well, I get that. But we need to craft a message that's targeted to a specific subset of people and a problem that they're trying to solve. So let's jam on that, right? Let's talk about all those different things. And eventually you kind of get there.
And so one of the things that I have been concerned about relating specifically to LinkedIn is with my SEO agency. We do a lot of work with professionals, both lawyers and doctors primarily. With lawyers, a lot of lawyers are pretty active on LinkedIn, but I've really enjoyed working with medical professionals. But I've been like, I don't know if any medical professionals are active, especially the doctors of small practices.
Yep.
How would you walk me through that process where it's like, I can serve both, but maybe I'd prefer one. Maybe, in that case, would you pull up Sales Navigator and be like, well, there's actually been, 2,000 orthopedic surgeons that have been active over the last 30 days. Is that kind of an easy way to go about that process?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Okay. Anybody who is really looking to use LinkedIn as a primary lead gen platform needs to have Sales Navigator, non-negotiable. And so you could go in there and you could say, okay, give me the size of the practice that you want, what their titles are, what their industries are, et cetera, and show me everybody in the United States that is in that title range. And then I can filter by who's actually active, right? And if they're active, you can look at, and you can see how active are they? Are they posting? Yeah. Are they commenting? Is there a consistent thread over the last 3 months of them showing up maybe once a week? Then those people go into a lead list and you start basically treating that lead list as your micro feed for Sales Navigator for LinkedIn. Sure. So I'll go into the home tab on Sales Navigator and I'll filter by a lead list where I've added these people and I will comment on their content, right? And I will make sure that my personal brand is on their personal brand, and then they'll end up looking at your profile or they'll respond to a comment that you leave on their site. Then you connect with them and then you start a conversation in the DMs, and that's how it goes. So there's that saying that if you have, 1,000 super fans versus 100,000 followers, it's better to have the 1,000 super fans. Similar concept, right? You're basically trying to find the people that you most like serving who are actually showing up on the platform and going from there. Now, if you end up realizing that, there's only 500 doctors who actually hang out on LinkedIn, then you have to have a different conversation, which is like, do I have to approach that go-to-market strategy differently? Am I cold calling them? Am I going in to see them? Am I emailing them, et cetera? But as a starting point, that is how I would walk you through it.
Okay, very good. So once we've got the ICP kind of nailed down, the next kind of part that we're talking about is the content strategy. You talked about the 60-30-10 with your primary focus, kind of your sweet spot being the 60%, and then your fascination being 30, and then personal being 10. Let's walk through maybe some of the most popular posts that you've put together for your clients or with your clients on each of those. Let's start with kind of the primary focus. For me, it would be AI SEO or just SEO. Am I just sharing tips? Am I sharing kind of what I'm learning right now? What are some things that I would be sharing, with, my followers on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So client use cases are always a great way to show what you do, who you do it for, and how you've helped them. And I think that needs to be something that you lean into very heavily. Obviously anonymously, or if they'll let you tag them, great. But really what you want to do is just say, here's a problem that a client came to me with the other day. Here's how I thought about challenging them to think about, it differently. Here's the solution that we put into play, and here are the results, right? Those types of, and you can create a template for those, put it into ChatGPT or whatever AI that you're using, and then just literally dictate what the use case is. My biggest content play is I will just start dictating random streams of consciousness into AI and have it formulate it. Now, I've configured AI to write very effectively as me because I have 4,500 posts on LinkedIn that I can upload to it. So it's got a pretty good sense of how I communicate. But, that's really the biggest piece, is showing that social proof from clients that you've worked with. I think talking about the journey for how you got there is also valuable. Talking about the learnings. I think sharing news is also very important. I think a lot of people on LinkedIn are hesitant to share news because when you share links or when you share news articles, they don't typically get as much distribution as a native post that you create. But you're seen as a thought leader if you're paying attention to the trends and you're informing people. There's somebody that I was listening to at a conference a couple weeks ago was saying, everything that you know is on the internet. People could go find it if they wanted to. Your job as somebody publishing content and creating content about a specific industry or niche is to be a curator for people. Find the news that's most relevant to them, right? So talking about something new that's being talked about in the news and then how that could apply to potential people in your client ICP, right? That is another benefit of sharing that content and really just getting comfortable with saying a few different things the same way over and over again, but in different ways, right? You know, you kind of have to, the sales and marketing posts are the toughest for people because they feel like they're A, self-promotional, and B, they feel like they're just repeating themselves.
Sure.
But not everybody is paying as close attention as you think they are. And so that's why it's important to kind of hammer that point home and always make sure that you're leaning into that kind of content.
Yeah, I like that. How many times a month should the average entrepreneur be posting if they really are looking to take their brand to the next level?
I would say that you probably want to show up on LinkedIn 2 to 3 times a week if you're brand new to it, just because you want to get in the habit of showing up, right? It's very easy to say, oh, there's two camps that I find people in. One is super bullish, doubling down on LinkedIn. They post every day for a month and then they're spent. And they're like, I don't know what to do here. I didn't see enough benefit from it, et cetera. Then the flip side is they post once a week. And if they miss a week, then they're like, well, I missed last week, so I'm going to miss this week. So, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, try to do that. And then on a Tuesday, Thursday, instead of posting, you spend most of your time searching for people and commenting on content. Commenting is a very, very powerful strategy or tactic on LinkedIn. Okay. It's one of those platforms that really values conversation. 47% of my appearances on LinkedIn are in the comments.
Wow.
And I only know that because LinkedIn showed me a view in my profile analytics for 3 days that showed that, and then they took it away from me. But I got a screenshot of it, so I know that that's the case. And so when you think about the power of that, right? If you are posting something, you have a follower count, say you have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, only 2,500 of them are logging in on a monthly basis according to those metrics, right?
Sure.
So immediately you're starting off from a much smaller sizable audience or addressable audience than your followers would suggest. And then you have to determine, okay, well, is LinkedIn actually going to show that content to those people? And are they going to be there the day that I post it? There's too many variables there.
Yeah.
With commenting, you actually have more control, especially if you're doing it in Sales Navigator and you've saved all of the leads that you want to start prospecting into there, and then you're commenting strategically, right? And you're starting to get out of the echo chamber that LinkedIn inevitably puts you in.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, and then the last one, really want to dig into supercharging my networking, right?
Yeah.
Which you're talking probably a little bit about that now with the liking and commenting.
Yep.
What are the keys to success there?
Don't overthink it and don't try to sell too quickly. Social selling is more like socializing than it is selling. You want to take an interest in who somebody is and get to know a little bit more about them and start a conversation just like you would at a networking event, right? You see somebody, you walk in, you shake their hand and you get to know a little bit about them, and then you kind of build a relationship from there. The beauty of LinkedIn is that you can actually get information about them before you introduce yourself. So it's important to pay attention to what they're putting in their profile and maybe look through their posts if they're posting and find some commonality that you can strike up a conversation about that sort of takes them off their guard, right? So they don't feel like they're going to get pitched. And that to me is one of the most important skills that you can learn on the platform. I always say that my favorite quote is by William Butler Yeats. It's, there are no strangers here, only friends you haven't yet met. And if you approach sales that way, in a traditional relationship building format, that is typically the best approach. It's not always the quickest, right? Like salespeople would say, well, if you send out 50 messages, basic math would indicate that you'll convert 1 or 2 of them. Sure, but that's also a really laborious process, and it's also not fun for you or the 48 people who didn't convert, right?
Yeah. Completely.
So you don't want to burn potential bridges that haven't even formed yet because you're sort of jumping at the gun and trying to get too salesy too quick. So that, I think, is really the most important thing. And also just you never know who's watching, right? So sometimes there's people who will say, I'm not getting enough engagement, I'm not getting any leads yet, et cetera, and they want to throw in the towel. But LinkedIn is a very long-term brand exercise, and you keep consistently posting and you keep showing up and you keep building relationships, you comment on other people's content. Inevitably, it starts to spiral and it turns into a flywheel, and then you start to momentum, and that momentum builds over time. And so that's why I place so much emphasis on it. I mean, I don't even teach content until week 3, because I don't want people to think that content is king. Content's helpful for sure, but the conversations that you're having on the platform are more important, undoubtedly.
How many people, when, we've kind of identified our ICP, how many people are you putting on that lead list that you're hoping to engage with on a weekly basis?
Yep. So LinkedIn Sales Navigator lets you create lead lists of 1,000, and at any given time, you can have 10,000 total leads saved to your list. That's a lot of leads. So it's important to really understand how to narrow down your search within Sales Navigator. And I would say I spend probably about 50% of my time in Sales Navigator and 50% of my time on regular LinkedIn. And I say regular LinkedIn because that's kind of my community, right? Those are the people that I'm, engaged with. They know me, I know them, like we have good rapport. The Sales Navigator piece is much more focused on targeted outreach and targeted messaging to my core ICP. So on Mondays, I basically take no meetings and I just live in Sales Navigator, and I'm cultivating and I'm curating and I'm culling the list, etc. But I would say if you have a really well-defined ICP, you should create 3 to 5 lead lists and rotate between them on a daily basis, so that you're basically seeing the content that they're creating, and then you can start to send them connection requests. And that's the other piece that is very important. You want to be adding people to your network every week. You can add up to 100 people per week to your network before LinkedIn will tell you to pump the brakes. And that is an exercise that most people just simply do not do. And if you add up 52 times 100, right? That's assuming an 100% acceptance rate. But even if it's 50% acceptance rate, you're adding 2,500 people per week, per year to your network that are always going to potentially see your content, and you never know what might happen.
Amazing. I love it. So what's the best way for people to connect with you? I assume it's maybe Instagram would be my best guess.
Yeah, no, Instagram is where I go to just post pictures of my family, for my family at home. LinkedIn is definitely the place. I'm actually also spending a lot more time on Substack these days. I really love the Substack platform. So I've got a newsletter there, liamdarmody.substack.com, and then you can find me on LinkedIn. There's only 3 Liam Darmodys on LinkedIn, one of whom I have actually met from Australia. I had beers with him in Sydney in 2013, which is just another example of the power of these platforms, right? You can find anybody and you can build connection with anyone across the world, which is a really powerful thing.
Amazing. So we'll link those up in the show notes. Thank you so much again, Liam, for your time today.
Very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.